Hello students, today we're going to be talking about the Texas Revolution and kind of the major highlights of this. Now keep in mind this is kind of like a roller coaster ride. We start off really low, we build up some steam before we crash very quickly. After this we will see some rising action again, and we'll kind of talk about how that goes as we are going along. First, let's start off with Gonzalez. Now this is the start of the Texas Revolution, if you keep that in mind. This is the one with the big flag, the come and take it flag. So make sure you've got come and take it written down. Now what happens is the Mexican soldiers come to take a cannon that had been lent to the Texans by the Spaniards. The Texans thought that this cannon was theirs and they were going to hold on to it so they could defend themselves. But the Mexicans were trying to take it back. When the Mexicans get there, the Texans fly this flag made out of Green DeWitt's daughter's wedding dress, actually, that says come and take it. In other words, they're kind of like two siblings fighting. The Mexican soldiers are asking them for something, just kind of like one older sibling would ask for the younger one to be quiet. And then the younger one would immediately respond back with make me, because that's the way the world works. So this was a Texan victory. I'd like you to bear that in mind. So we bear up some steam. We continue to go, and we end up at Goliad. Now at Goliad, this battle only lasted about 30 minutes, give or take, and this was another Texan victory. The big thing here is that we see that Texans are building up confidence. It's kind of like one of those perfect weeks. Even if you make a mistake, you kind of feel real happy and you feel like even your mistakes are working in your favor. So with this Texan victory, there's a lot of confidence. Some might even argue that the Texans become a little bit overconfident. We are going to come back later to Goliad, and the tone is going to be very, very different. They're going to be very upset whenever we get back. So now we're going to move on to San Antonio. We go to San Antonio just 'cause. Now remember, General Koss is in town, in Texas, to try and capture William B. Travis because of the second conflict at Anahuac. General Koss at this time is in San Antonio. And at this time, the Texans arrive and lay San Antonio to siege, which is basically a military blockade against supplies. They're basically trying to starve out General Koss. General Koss retreats to the Alamo, where eventually he does end up surrendering. At this point in the war, Texans firmly believed that we had won the entire battle. And a lot of them start to go home. Not only with this battle, we actually win the whole war in their mind. That's why they're starting to go home. This was the last Mexican stronghold in all of Texas at the time. But they weren't quite right, and we're going to see why in a moment. So, the Constitution and Declaration of Independence were the next logical step. If we felt that we had won the war against Mexico, it was time to declare our independence. This was partially also due to, at the same time that was happening, the Alamo had been laid under siege due to Santa Anna. You see, General Koss over in San Antonio, that's Santa Anna's brother-in-law. And Santa Anna, as you can see, was not very happy that his family had been beaten by the Texans. So he shows up early, a lot earlier than it was expected, and starts laying siege to the Alamo. So William B. Travis sends lots of letters to the convention telling them about the siege that was going on, imploring them, begging them, asking them to write a Declaration of Independence. So, at this convention, they modeled the Constitution and Declaration of Independence, that's the DOI. They modeled them after the United States Constitution and Declaration of Independence. The sole author of the Declaration of Independence is George Childress. So he was the only writer of the Declaration of Independence, and that was really kind of modeled off of Thomas Jefferson's Declaration of Independence. It says a lot of the same things. Now remember, a Declaration of Independence is like a breakup letter. They're real sad about it. So we come down here, and at the same time that the Constitution is going on, keep in mind, Santa Anna is laying siege to the Alamo. The Alamo is a 2-week-long siege where Santa Anna is basically going to punish all of the Texans for kind of beating his family. So at the Alamo, Santa Anna eventually is going to fly a red flag the night before he attacks. This means that there is no quarter. Guys, no quarter does not mean that he's not going to give them quarters for the vending machines. No quarter means that there's going to be no mercy. In other words, if you fight, You are going to die. So the Texan leaders, Davy Crockett, who was from Tennessee, you had James Bowie, you had Colonel Neal, you had William B. Travis. These guys stand up to Santa Anna for these 2 weeks. Colonel Neal ends up getting taken out of the battle. He had to leave because of a family illness. But Crockett, Bowie, and Travis all stay behind. Now, this is one of the most famous events in Texan history, but it wasn't a Texas victory. Mexico won overwhelmingly. What ended up happening, though, is something that's an interesting fact. The death toll was about 3-1 in favor of the Texans. In other words, 600 Mexican soldiers died to every, the 180, give or take, Texan soldiers. There was only one survivor in the Texan side at this point, and that was because he was saying that basically the Texans had kidnapped him and made him fight. Now remember earlier we talked about how we were going to come back to all these same places just with a different tone? Well, they're pretty sad about this, right? San Antonio was the last place, and they thought they had won because of it, but then the Alamo gets taken right back by Santa Anna. And this is the beginning of the decline for Texas. They had been doing so well. It was like that perfect week, and then at the Constitution, it starts to sharply decline. Everybody starts to see that this isn't going to be quite as easy as they thought it was. And it gets a little bit worse after the Goliad Massacre. At the Goliad Massacre, this is a result of Fannin, General Fannin, who was under Houston. He surrendered his troops at Goliad Creek, which was a little battle while he was trying to go meet up with Sam Houston. Urrea, who was on Santa Anna's side, a Mexican soldier, he defends the Texans in a lot of letters to Santa Anna, asking that he spare their lives. But Santa Anna orders their execution the same way that they would execute pirates, which means that he wants them to be put to death by a firing squad. So, on Palm Sunday, he marches all of the Texan soldiers out, and they believe they're just going to work detail or maybe even being released. But at that point, the Mexican soldiers open fire on them, and that ends with about 340 Texan soldiers dead that day. There were about 20 or so survivors, and a lot of them got away, but some of them were actually ill or had special skills and were saved for that. So after both the Alamo and the Goliad Massacre, people are afraid. They're afraid of Santa Anna. So the Anglo settlers started to run back to the United States, basically. They pack up all their things and they leave so fast that the food or dinner was still warm on the stove. They left so fast that it was still steaming. They were so terrified, and they wanted to get out because they were afraid. You see, Santa Anna was kind of raised in the Spanish tradition of how to deal with revolt. And if you remember back from the Mexican Revolution, the Spaniards basically would treat rebels like pirates. They would do exactly what Santa Anna did at Goliad. If they were rebelling, everyone who was rebelling was executed, even if they surrendered, and everyone who helped them was executed. So even if Anglos didn't support revolution, they began to run in this what was eventually known as the Runaway Scrape. This is a reminder that not all casualties are on the battlefield. Because a lot of people, because they left so quickly, because they left all their food, their clothes, because so many people were running without any kind of supplies, a lot of them ended up dying. Some drowned in rivers as they were trying to cross. Others died because of the cold. It was an unusually cold and rainy spring. And if you've ever been wet in the cold, you know that you can't get warm. It sinks down to your bones. So the Runaway Scrape, that was the lowest of the roller coaster. This is where it seemed that all hope was lost and everybody was abandoning Texas. So then we're going to move over here and we're going to see the second leg of this war. So Sam Houston, right down here, had earlier ordered Fannin to abandon Goliad. Fannin ignored these orders, waiting for a few of his men. Sam Houston also had ordered Travis to abandon and destroy the Alamo, but Travis decided that it was much more important to stay behind. So both of his orders were ignored. At this point, Sam Houston made it very clear that he had to pick his battles. That's why he didn't want to fight at the Alamo. That's why he didn't want to have famine at Goliad. He didn't want him to split his troops up. He wanted to stand together and stand strong and pick the right battle to fight. Sam Houston was very militarily minded. Keep in mind, he was actually raised for a while by Andrew Jackson and Cherokee as well. So he said he has to pick his battles. He thought, maybe I can't overpower them. Maybe I can outthink them. And that's where the siesta, or the nap, comes into play. At San Jacinto, there was a bridge over Vince's Bayou, a bridge that Sam Houston knew was the only way out for both of the armies. So even though Sam Houston had a few of his men not agree with his strategy, he ordered Erastus Smith, or Deaf Smith as he was known because he was a little bit deaf, he ordered him to go destroy that bridge. That meant that the Texans had to fight or die because even the Mexican army wasn't able to retreat, neither was the Texan army. So, this was an example of guerrilla warfare. That means attack fast, attack quick, and attack hard. In fact, this battle was so fast that it was over in only 18 minutes. That's faster than I drive to work, and I'm sure it's faster than your guys' bus to school is. So during this battle, you hear the battle cries that call back to these two events that happened beforehand. Remember the Alamo, and remember Goliad. So this battle was over in 18 minutes, and by the time that the smoke cleared, Santa Anna had disappeared. The death toll was about 640 for the Mexican army, and that was about 9 soldiers for the Texan army. So that means that the death toll was about 91 to 1. Santa Anna was found on the 22nd, and he surrendered. He was actually found in regular Mexican soldiers' uniform, and he was only found out because other soldiers were referring to him as El Presidente, which was kind of a big mistake on the airport. So this leads to the Treaty of Velasco, which is the official end of the Texas Revolution. The Treaty of Velasco is something that we're going to come back to next semester when we're talking about how Texas fared as a republic, because a lot of these things kind of leave themselves open to conflict. You have 2 different treaties here. You've got the public treaty on one side, the treaty that was released to the public. Then you have the secret treaty, the treaty that was kind of done behind closed doors. The public treaty states that the Mexican army wouldn't fight Texas anymore. This is a plus for Texas, and it's kind of a plus for Mexico too, because now this ends the war. Mexico's army is going to leave Texas, and prisoners of war will be exchanged. Finally, any property seized is going to be returned to the Texans. This one was the public treaty because it wasn't quite as controversial as the secret treaty. It wasn't quite as... didn't leave itself open to as much argument. The secret treaty over here is a little bit different. First part is that Mexico is going to recognize Texas as an independent nation. The only way that this would work, though, is if Santa Anna agreed. So, part of this treaty was to release Santa Anna. Now remember, if you were in this time and your brother was at Gonzalez, your father was at the Alamo, if you found out that Santa Anna was going to be released, you wouldn't just be sad, you would be angry. So a lot of people actually felt this way, and they were probably going to kill him if he was released immediately, because there was an angry mob calling for his execution almost. So, Santa Anna's release was part of this, but it had to be secret because people did not want to see him walk away. Then you have the border at the Rio Grande. This is also part of the treaty that Santa Anna agrees to as long as he is released. We're going to come back to that a little bit later and see how that's a source of conflict. So, the Texas Revolution had its ups and downs and was kind of like a roller coaster. We start off doing really well, we come to the Constitution to declare our independence, and then we see a sharp decline. We see people really start to have a hard time with the Alamo, the Goliad Massacre, and the Runaway Scrape. Sam Houston turns it around at San Jacinto, and that's what ends up with the Treaty of Velasco. I hope this was helpful, guys, and have a wonderful day. I'll see you all very shortly.